So this is an art lesson for 4th to 6th graders on the Kuna Indian Molas. Alright guys, we're going to talk about the Kuna Indians. So they live in Panama and they are the largest indigenous group there. They got their independence from the Panama government in 1925, mainly because of these. This is a Molas panel. They're sewn by the women and stitched onto their blouses as part of their traditional dress. So the government actually tried to ban their language, customs, and traditional way of dressing, and the Kuna just straight up revolted. They won their independence, and the women still wear their Molas panels on their blouses today. So this is a part of their cultural heritage that is fiercely protected. But the Kuna now sell Molas panels to tourists as art and decorations. So we're going to take a look at their designs and figure out what makes a design a Molas. So the first thing you notice when you see Molas is that it is bright. They love bright colors and tend to use a lot of orange, red, and burgundy. Next, there's a lot of outlines and layers of lines, and these stand out because of dark colors to contrast with the bright. Next, you'll notice there's lots of geometric shapes. Everything just kind of fits together like a puzzle. But the main thing you see is that there is no empty space. So traditionally, they believe evil spirits settle in empty spaces, so everything around their subjects is filled in. And you'll see a lot of the same little shapes being used. So triangles will just fill an area, and those represent their huts. Or you'll see vertical lines, and those look like light coming through the slats of their huts. And these both symbolize protection of the home. Or you'll see a lot of labyrinths and mazes for evil spirits to get lost in, or little triangles look like jagged teeth around objects like this to bite away evil spirits. Okay, now let's talk about what these designs are actually of. So you'll see a lot of animals, plants, people, scenes of life that represent their history. And some are more abstract, like this one. And that's based on their nose rings that all the women wear. So the old school form of these designs were painted directly on their bodies. Once cloth was introduced, they began to sew them, and they have this crazy way of sewing them. They'll take layers of different colors of fabric, do basic stitching of their designs through all those layers, then cut through each layer of fabric to expose the color beneath. Then they'll fold back each little flap of fabric they cut and sew it down with tiny stitches so it looks super nice and finished. Okay, now we're going to talk about how we would design a Molas. So first, let's pick our content or our subject matter. So I've been obsessed with astronomy lately, so I'm going to do a rocket ship. So here's my design that I did. So I did it in pencil first and then went over it in a Sharpie so it would be dark enough to trace it onto my canvas. So a few notes on design. One of the common mistakes that at least I make is that I get proportions off. Way off. So I try and pay attention to just the proportion of my objects, and I want to make sure that they are large and that they're filling up the space. And also, if you draw objects in like an upward motion like that, it implies movement, which just gives your drawing just some more like visual interest, just makes things interesting. So then I added a sun and a planet here, and so I did it on either side so that there's kind of a balance to the picture. But I did different ones so that there's also variety. And that also just makes things more interesting. And then for our space fillers, I went on kind of a simpler form of a maze and did these geometric patterns. And this took me a while to figure out, but it's basically just a spiral with sharp edges. Since we're just learning this, we don't want to make things too complicated because we're going to paint it, so just try and make things big and full. So then after we draw our design, we will tape our canvas down with masking tape, and that will give us a nice solid border to work with. And then we're going to figure out our color palette. So I chose these colors. So we've got our brighter colors and then our darker ones for contrast. And it's good just to pick, maybe 5 or 6 just to keep things simple. And we've got our paint brushes. I just used acrylic paint because that's what I had on hand, and it is nice and cheap. And it also dries fast and you can layer it. So for these geometric shapes, what I did was I just did a really thick color, like with the teal, and did really thick lines, and then went over it once it dried with a thin black line, so it looks like there's different layers. Okay, so then this is what a finished one could look like.